how hyperinflation is going to destroy America and our future to our children. Stay tuned. Welcome to the Wealth Transfer. I'm Terry Saka. So today, now you're hearing this, and it's not just here at the program, thank goodness it's mainstream, but you are hearing about inflation, extraordinary inflation, even to the point where Bank of America is discussing now hyperinflation coming. And they're trying to caveat it with the word transitory. Meaning, it's just going to be short term. I'm still going to continue to make the case it's not as short term as you think, and I'm going to explain why, because what we're getting ready to experience is going to be 1970s style on steroids, but it's a very, very different playing field, and I want to get in to show you that today. So before we do, you can find us YouTube at Wealth Transfer News. I encourage you, please go there. You could also get Rigged Against You is there, but we also have a new YouTube channel, Rigged Against You, that specifically has the podcast content, as well as get the podcast. So I encourage you to go there and subscribe, become part of the community. We'd appreciate it. But in the conversation of inflation, hyperinflation, they're discussing it now mainstream because they have to. Lumber costs up hundreds of percent, and food, and wait till you see what's going on with gasoline and oil and you name it. You can't continue to print trillions of dollars and put it into the system in non-productive forms. So what they're doing is they're giving this last 1.9 trillion they did was nothing more than basically payoffs, but it wasn't producing. It wasn't designed to produce economic growth. Yet there's a lot of money out there. There's trillions in the savings accounts in banks, and yet the banks, as we showed last week, aren't even beginning to make loans, which really will show and expose the inflation. So I think when Bank of America brings up hyperinflation, it's because they're looking at the idea of there's trillions of dollars right now that instead of loaning out, the banks have been going into the stock market making money. But now the PPP loans are going away, so banks are going to be forced to start loaning money. And as they do, you are going to see more inflation than we've ever seen. Now, This Joe Biden is no doubt going to be Jimmy Carter on steroids. Now, here's the difference, and the most important part of this. In the 70s, when Jimmy Carter was taking over, we had extraordinary inflation, but we were just beginning, you see. We were just beginning this new dollar experiment. This Federal Reserve note was just beginning. 1971, when they came off the gold standard, right? So we had a lot of hyperinflation because we came off this gold standard and they put hundreds of billions of dollars immediately into the system. And back then, that was a lot of money. That caused the 19% interest rates, caused a major inflation, gas, you name it, food. Here's the difference. We're not starting new right now. We're actually at the end of our cycle. We're at the end of the monetary system that we're in right now. This dollar standard here, this Federal Reserve note, is at the end of its cycle. It's now 50 years. And it's never lasted usually that long, maybe 40 plus, and they change currencies. So this time around, putting this kind of money into the system, trillions, mind you, and they're talking about doing more, is going to create that hyperinflation scenario Bank of America is talking about. And more importantly, we need to be aware that because it's at the end of a cycle of this monetary system, the damage is going to be extraordinary. It will come after your savings. Why stuff like this is going to be so unbelievably valuable in the future. Tangible assets, period, are going to be very important. So I want to show you this first take on as they get into mentioning inflation. Now, I know you're hearing it, but I want you to see these graphs because it is an unbelievable image to give you the evidence that we're just not only beginning in this phase, which, believe me, I'm not happy either. I've had some plans that I had to put on hold, and all of a sudden I'm looking at double, triple costs on things, and it's not good. So we have to work so much harder for the exact same thing. So this is very hard for all of us, that's for sure. But I do know it's that important to be diversified out of the paper world. But I want to show you this with inflation because when you see them, you're going to start believing. Take a look. This is a Google search for the word inflation in the United States. Look on the right how high that search is. Now, I'm actually encouraged by that, by the way, because it means the individual is actually researching the idea of inflation, what it is and what is it going to do. So there's actually people researching for the word inflation, which is good news. That is good because at least you can be prepared. At least you can strategize on what you need or what you may want to buy. For instance, if you know you're going to do something in a year and a half from now, you may want to buy certain things now because they'll be less expensive now than they will in a year from now. And so that's good news that they're researching the word inflation. But now look at this one where this is from money managers, banks, portfolio managers, financial advisors. Look at just the word mentioned. This is corporations mainly too, like in their minutes, their company corporate minutes and such. Look at how these companies, how many are mentioning the word inflation to their product, good, or service. Take a look at this. Now, this is just the mention of inflation on calls jumping 800%, pointing out notes of higher inflation. Now, the dark blue line is merely the consumer price index year over year. And then look at the mentions of inflation year over year. Unbelievable rise in what they believe is coming. Now, we have a lot of CEOs, money managers, corporations, they already know the products are already expensive. So my guess is they're going to start shrinking packaging. We're going to start paying the same money for less goods, and it's going to continue. But the fact that that amount of mentioning from companies and corporations tells you we haven't begun. Now you notice the year over year on the consumer price index hasn't gone up yet. You see what I mean? It's just beginning. So when we're at this beginning stage of inflation, this is where it gets into the term hyperinflation. And what's really crazy, I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but we do have inflationnation.org and hyperinflationnation.org on the internet. We should probably use it somehow because here it is. And I bought that 10 years ago. But hyperinflation, now here's a definition of hyperinflation. And Bank of America is saying hyperinflation. And hyperinflation means it's going to go up really fast, very expensive, and almost to a form of out of control. So take a look at this.
Hyperinflation is a term to describe rapid, excessive, and out of control general price increases in an economy. While inflation is a measure of the pace of rising prices for goods and services, hyperinflation is rapidly rising inflation, typically measuring more than 50% per month. Hyperinflation has occurred many times throughout history. The best example of hyperinflation took place in Weimar, Germany in 1923. In order to pay the striking workers, the government simply printed more money. This flood of money led to hyperinflation as the more money was printed, the more prices rose. Prices ran out of control. For example, a loaf of bread, which cost 250 marks in January 1923, had risen to 200 billion marks in November 1923. In the fall of 1923, it cost more to print a note than the note was worth. During the crisis, workers were often paid twice per day because prices rose so fast their wages were virtually worthless by lunchtime.
We're going to take a quick break. We'll come back and we'll talk about it.
The world is at a tipping point. Our fragile food supply is being destroyed by locusts and fires. A global viral pandemic is collapsing the economic supply chain, impacting financial markets all around the world, leaving you and your finances more vulnerable than ever. Now is the time to protect and preserve your assets. Cornerstone Asset Metals is here to help you protect and preserve what you've worked so hard to gain. Whether you have IRAs to protect, 401ks to preserve, or cash in the bank, our asset specialists are here to support you. Call now and we'll send you urgent information regarding changes to the dollar and the challenges to our economy that you need to be prepared for. Learn how easy it is to roll over your current IRA or 401k into a physical precious metals IRA. We can even arrange to have your precious metals stored in a private vault or send it directly to your home. Do not delay. Call 888-747-3309 today. That's 888-747-3309. Invest in precious metals and create security in your future today. Call now.
Welcome back. So a lot of people don't really maybe want to get the idea of hyperinflation, but the fact Bank of America is even telling us, and we have corporate overlords telling us there's a serious problem. And it's going into not just the supply chain, it's even here in America, as we keep talking about, there is a food crisis coming. And the food crisis is because of a massive drought. We're going to have tremendous fires in Arizona and all through the Southwest. We're going to have issues, and we need to be prepared. So to the point where it may even behoove to go buy a freezer for your garage and buy a whole quarter of a pig or a half a cow or a quarter of a cow or something. You know, that really is a good investment right now, you see. This is the kind of stuff that you can do to prepare and ride out if it's going to be transitory. Now, I'm contending, unfortunately, it's not transitory. I'm saying because we're at the end of a cycle of a hyperinflationary phase, that they're going to blow out the system. Now, I'm kind of guessing on the timing. I say 2 years, maybe 3, but they're going to blow the system out and we're going to have a brand new form of currency to some extent, but they're going to need another event. My guess, some man-made created bioweapon super variant of some kind of virus is going to come and attack the world, and then that's going to put the final nail in this whole cycle. So I just want you to be very cautious because this is not as transitory as I think they are trying to let you believe. This is very real. Now, it may not go full-blown Weimar Germany. It may not be that bad. We may not be Zimbabwe and have $1 trillion note. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying we're going to experience it in our food, our clothing, goods, services, rent, you name it. It's going to be everywhere, and that's very important. We need to make proper investments. That's what I'm saying. If we're doing, like, for instance, the stimulus, 1.9 trillion for nothing, non-productive stimulus. Put 1.9 trillion into the electric grid system or something that will revolutionize our infrastructure and not have hacks on our energy system. So now you don't have gasoline on the East Coast. I mean, let's reinvest into a way that expands our opportunity, not encourage, zombies on the couch. And so it's a big deal. Now, we did show you that people are researching inflation. My guess, they're trying to time things. People are trying to gauge when is the crash coming? When is this certain impact going to be here? Because they're not just researching it, at the same time, they're all in the stock market. And look at the mention of stock market bubble. Take a look at this. This is merely an indicator of rising concern about a stock market bubble. This is the frequency of web searches focusing on a stock market bubble. That's a pretty big jump right there. And the reason they're doing that is because they know the talk of inflation is coming. And so now they're researching stock market bubble. Yet most investors are still all in the market. And when I say all in, I mean all in. They're so in the market, they are borrowing money to buy more stock. And yet at the same time, they know the bubble is ready to blow. They know inflation's coming. And so they're trying to time it, which I get it, but we have to be cautious. Personally, as an old financial advisor, the best advice I can give you in those scenarios, take 1/3 out of the market now. Start diversifying into tangible assets like this, but take 1/3 off the table. If you want to stay with the other 2/3. Because that way you're balanced, you're diversified out. Don't put all in, as I keep explaining, 10,000 cattle going through one gate. You don't want to be in that mix. So it's very important as you profit, very important as you gain, that you take 25% off, 25% off, 25% off. Let the last 25 run. It's not about greed. It's about being wise in our strategy. Because take a look from that point of view, where our margin debt is right now, how much money people are borrowing to stay in a stock market that they know is in a bubble and they know inflation's coming. So take a look at this. Now, this is a chart of margin debt balances. And as you can see, going back to the crash of 87, the dot-com crash in the middle, financial crisis, the Brexit, 2008 Fed taper tantrum, and now on the right where we're in everything bubble. We are so heavily margined in the market, way beyond 2000 and 2008. That's a big number. That is a big deal. It's not like you go in with, $50,000 and it's just 50,000, that's it. You lose it, you gain, it's all good. When you go in and borrow another 50,000 on top of 50,000, you could actually get so wiped out to zero, you may actually owe money. You don't want to do that. So if anything, I encourage people be very respectful to your portfolio and don't be in margin. You should not be borrowing money to do investing. I think that's very dangerous right now because we're at the top of a cycle. And it's not a healthy cycle to be at the top of, especially borrowing that level of money. Now, what gets me, and I want to show this from the margin debt point of view, and I want you to see it in relation to the crashes that happened after the peaks of such extraordinary borrowing. Take a look at this. This is margin debt balances year over year in percentage change. But I want you to pay attention is notice the peaks. On the left there, that's a year-long consolidation. Look at the crash. Next to that, the crash of 1987. In the middle, look at the major crash in the dot-com crash. And look at the big one on financial crash. Look where the everything bubble is, straight up, almost as high at the point of the first two at 80 percentile. And you notice with the chart, every time it hits that big peak, what happens to it? It crashes. We're that close. So it's very important while we're playing at the end, and I get not wanting to miss out. There is a lot of cash out there, so the market definitely could continue to run. Now, I contend, what's it going to do? 20%? You're going to have this move 20% probably in the next few weeks with what's happening right now. So it's a relative issue. I just wouldn't want to have all my eggs in one basket, and now's the time. As you can see, they're researching it. People are considering it. And the reason I'm putting this in the group form is I want you to understand the cattle concept. That many people are researching inflation. That many people are paying attention to stock market bubble in research. And look at the number of margin. Can you imagine the millions upon millions of retail investors when they all of a sudden get a whiff that it's better to get out? It'll be too hard. When you have that many cattle coming through one gate, it will not be easy to get out, and you will lose an extraordinary amount of the money you have earned over the last 10 years, and that's not a healthy place to be in a hyperinflationary environment. That's why it's so vital that you get diversified in tangible assets right now. So I'm going to show just one more thing on the budget deficit and why this is not repairable, because not only are we going into hyperinflation, but here's our government standard now. Take a look at this. This is just the U.S. budget deficit watch, and just all you have to do is look to the right side. You can see where we were even through the 2008, but look to the right side. It's completely, absolutely collapsing. Folks, we're in a serious situation at a time where we are in a hyperinflation according to Bank of America. We know inflation's here because we're buying the goods and services. at a time where our currency is at the end of its cycle, not the beginning, and the world is going through still tyrannical lockdowns and destroying the supply chain to the point where chips are even being challenged, where automobiles may have a couple years before they can even catch up. Not the time to be excessive, the time to be wise and strategic, because I want to get into this. Well, I tell you what, let me take a quick break here, and then we'll be right back.
The world is at a tipping point. Our fragile food supply is being destroyed by locusts and fires. A global viral pandemic is collapsing the economic supply chain, impacting financial markets all around the world, leaving you and your finances more vulnerable than ever. Now is the time to protect and preserve your assets. Cornerstone Asset Metals is here to help you protect and preserve what you've worked so hard to gain. Whether you have IRAs to protect, 401ks to preserve, or cash in the bank, our asset specialists are here to support you. Call now and we'll send you urgent information regarding changes to the dollar and the challenges to our economy that you need to be prepared for. Learn how easy it is to roll over your current IRA or 401k into a physical precious metals IRA. We can even arrange to have your precious metals stored in a private vault or send it directly to your home. Do not delay. Call 888-747-3309 today. That's 888-747-3309. Invest in precious metals and create security in your future today. Call now.
Welcome back. So I have a really nice video here. It's going to be a few minutes long. This is part of our documentary, actually, End Times in the Financial System. And it just shows the parallels between the Empire of Rome and America. It's a brilliant piece of parallel because when you're done with that few minutes of video here, you're going to go, whoa, wait a minute. We're doing exactly what Rome did before they collapsed. So here we are at the end of our cycle. We're in a hyperinflationary environment where this is becoming down to a point of zero. We're being challenged around the world. Our military is going woke and weak. They're literally 71% of the youth cannot even get in the military right now because of obesity, criminal record, and other mental disorders. Think about that. America is in a very serious decline, and we need not only prayer, but we need focus. So I highly recommend take advantage of this documentary after you see it. I would go and order it. This is just a snippet of it. But when you see how close we are to Rome, you're going to understand everything we just talked about today is something to take serious. So God bless each and every one of you. Enjoy this video.
Biblical prophecy isn't only God showing us the future, it's God revealing a pattern in history so we can be prepared for the future.
Let me tell you a story of a young empire that conquered the world. This empire was rich and prosperous and influenced the world in every way with their culture. Their money was pure and sound as it was gold and silver. As this empire's economic influence began to grow, so did its military. And inevitably, they put this military to use and started to go to war. Now, war is expensive, and they needed to borrow the wealth of its citizens by debasing the value of their currency. As this great empire continued to develop, they took on a lot more financial burdens with social programs and welfare. Many even believed that the government handouts were by design to distract the masses so they wouldn't revolt and overthrow the government. They could no longer afford the welfare and social programs and decided to raise taxes and put the burden on its producing citizens to pay for the poor ones. This led to a loss of faith and love for one's country, and with it the spirit of liberty to enjoy the fruits of one's labor rather than giving it all away forcefully through government decree. The empire that was once self-sustained with sound economics needed to save money and began outsourcing food production out of the country. This led to a lack of control over their food supply and ultimately put their livelihood in the hands of foreigners that might have a different agenda. The empire began to lack politicians with integrity, as many educated people used their knowledge in business rather than politics. Even the Christian church discouraged many good Christians from holding office, even though they preached vehemently against the abuses of defiled and corrupt politicians. The family demographic began to change drastically as less children were born and more were aborted. Immorality was rampant as violence and sex were forms of entertainment. Even the church as a whole would not check this decline in morals, but secretly condoned a lot of it by being consumers. Through all of these distractions, the new generation that was rising up, although they had the world at their fingertips through education and knowledge, had no interest in defending the freedom that gained them their knowledge. In effect, the military power began to decline drastically, and so did faith in that nation, as they continued to debase their currency more and more. Other empires started to notice how weak they were becoming, and eventually came in and destroyed that great empire and enslaved many of their people. Is this prophecy or history? This great empire that we speak of was Rome. In 476 AD, Romulus, who was the last Roman emperor in the West, was overthrown by the Germanic leader Odoacer, who became the first barbarian to rule in Rome. The order that the Roman Empire had brought to Western Europe for over 1,000 years was no more. Is America now falling prey to the same fate as the Roman Empire? Well, let's take a look.
Wealth Transfer News presents the brand new documentary, End Times and Our Financial System. To properly understand Bible prophecy, we must first understand the global financial system. After working in the financial world for many years, the creators of this documentary have compiled the most relevant information, all from a biblical worldview. The world has changed overnight, and something is about to happen to our monetary system that we have never seen. How does the most prosperous nation on earth collapse? How exactly does inflation hurt the economy, and how will the global transition to a full digital currency affect you? All of these questions are answered from a biblical perspective. To order your copy, go to endtimesdocumentary.com. That's endtimesdocumentary.com.